Today, we're unpacking a really unconventional text that literally flips the script on how we view habits and addiction. We're going to go on a journey into how our brains get hijacked and, well, more importantly, discover the psychological shifts you need to take back control. It's a fascinating deep dive, and I am absolutely pumped to explore these surprising paradigms with you. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive right into this. Think about this central paradox for a second. If you ask anyone who's stuck in a destructive habit, if they do it all over again knowing what they know now, the answer is almost always a resounding no way, right? Yet, they keep doing it. Why? Why do intelligent, totally rational people find it so incredibly difficult to stop a behavior that they know is draining their time, their energy, and their confidence? Well, this is the exact core question our source material attempts to answer. So, the source we're analyzing today is called the Easypeasy Hackbook. It's actually an open source adaptation based on Alan Carr's famous Easy Way method, but it's specifically targeted at internet pornography addiction. And what makes this text so unique is that it completely rejects conventional strategies. I mean, it argues that using willpower or, trying to slowly cut down on the habit is fundamentally flawed. Basically, it sets the user up for failure right from the start. In fact, the text makes this incredibly bold claim. It says you can painlessly quit porn immediately without willpower or any sense of deprivation or sacrifice. I mean, that is a massive statement, right? But whether you initially believe that's possible or not, the author's core argument is that quitting isn't about self-deprivation at all. Actually, it's about a complete perspective shift. The whole argument is that once you truly understand the mechanisms keeping you hooked, the desire to engage in the habit just vanishes. So that brings us to part one, the sinister trap. Let's look at how this trap is actually sprung. You see, no one ever wakes up and decides to get addicted. It always starts with curiosity, and that creates this false sense of security. A user might initially find the content kind of amateurish or even slightly repulsive, thinking, oh, I could never get hooked on this. But that subtle exposure, that is exactly how the trap snaps shut. I absolutely love this vivid analogy from the book to explain it. It says the trap is similar to wearing tight shoes just to obtain the pleasure of taking them off. Think about that. The habit doesn't actually add any genuine value to your life. It simply creates an artificial void, a sense of tension or withdrawal. And when you finally give in to the habit, you are really just briefly relieving that tension. It's the total illusion of a benefit, when in reality, you're just returning to the baseline of peace that non-users experience literally all the time. Moving on to part two, the Coolidge effect. We're looking at hijacking rewards here. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is, to truly understand why the trap is so incredibly sticky, we have to look at our biology, and specifically, how modern internet speeds interact with our ancient evolutionary wiring. See, human reward mechanisms were designed by nature to encourage reproduction, but internet pornography introduces something completely unnatural into the mix, the Coolidge effect. It provides this constant, high-speed stream of supernormal stimuli. We're talking limitless novelty that triggers unnatural floods of dopamine. Your brain is essentially tricked into thinking it just hit the evolutionary jackpot, which completely hijacks your natural reward circuitry. And this creates a really vicious biological cycle. Here's how it plays out. First, you get that massive dopamine flood. But the brain, because it's trying to protect itself from this unnatural overload, actually downregulates its receptors. You basically become desensitized. And that leads directly to step three, the need for even more novelty. Users end up finding themselves crossing their own personal red lines, right? Seeking out increasingly shocking content just to feel that exact same high. It's a vicious escalation of that doom scrolling we all occasionally fall into. And then, when they stop, step four hits hard, withdrawal pangs. It's not necessarily physical pain, but rather this subtle, empty feeling of insecurity that drives them right back to step one. The text highlights a very specific chemical driving this whole process, delta-phosphate. Whenever your brain receives these massive dopamine hits, it actually stores the event as a script for easy recall, and it releases delta-phosphate to strengthen those specific neural pathways. The text brilliantly describes this as greasing a water slide. So your brain rewires itself so that the next time you feel stress or boredom or loneliness, that slide is already greased up, making it incredibly easy to just slip right back down into the habit. Ultimately, this creates a complete biological and psychological maze. The text refers to the physical dopamine withdrawal as the little monster. As I mentioned, it's not some severe physical pain, but more like a mild, annoying, dripping tap feeling of emptiness. But here's the kicker. That little monster feeds directly into the big monster. And the big monster is the brainwashing that actually tells you you need this habit to cope with life. This creates a continuous, endless feedback loop of urges, then giving in, and then facing those dopamine drops that start the whole cycle over again.
Which brings us to part 3, the brainwashing illusion. This is the psychological lock.
So if the physical withdrawal is actually quite mild, what on earth keeps people trapped for years? Well, the book argues it's psychological conditioning. A user perceives the habit as a way to, relieve stress, cure boredom, or just help them relax. But the actual reality is the exact opposite. Because supernormal stimuli sap your energy and downregulate your dopamine, the habit actually causes stress. It creates lethargy, and it leaves the user with what the author calls sinister black shadows of guilt and diminished confidence just lurking at the back of their mind.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that the willpower method fails entirely because of how it frames the problem. Think about it. If you use willpower, you are fundamentally telling yourself, I am giving up something I love, something that helps me, but I have to resist it for my health. Because you still falsely believe you're making a genuine sacrifice, you feel deprived. And eventually, on a bad day when you're tired or stressed, your willpower will deplete, and that brainwashing is going to pull you right back in.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core deception of the habit. The book uses this analogy that I think hits the nail on the head. Imagine a person putting expensive ointment on a spreading cold sore. The ointment makes the sore vanish temporarily, sure, but it always comes back bigger. Well, eventually, doctors discover it's actually the ointment causing the sore in the first place. Once the patient realizes the cure is actually the disease, it takes absolutely zero willpower to throw that ointment away. You wouldn't miss it at all. You'd be thrilled to be rid of it. And that leads us to our final section, part 4, the easy escape. Let's talk about shattering that illusion. Once you realize the habit creates the very stress it pretends to relieve, you arrive at this final massive mindset shift. The author promises there is absolutely nothing of value to give up, literally nothing. Instead, there are massive psychological gains waiting for you on the other side. You experience a return of your natural confidence and courage. You gain freedom from the mental slavery of that loop. You completely eradicate those sinister black shadows of self-doubt. And on a purely practical level, you reclaim vast amounts of wasted time and physical energy. Remember the analogy? You aren't giving up a crutch, you are just finally taking off those heavy, tight shoes.
So how does the Easypeasy method actually work in practice? Well, you don't fight the urge with sheer force. Instead, you just dismantle the brainwashing. By logically deconstructing those false beliefs that you need or enjoy the habit, you completely shatter the illusion of the trap. And the crazy part is, without the brainwashing, the physical withdrawal is easily ignored. The escape becomes immediate, permanent, and surprisingly painless.
I want to leave you with this final, truly provocative thought to take away from our time today. Whether you're dealing with this specific issue or, honestly, any other deeply ingrained habit in your life, ask yourself this. If the behavior is actually creating the very void it promises to fill, what are you actually giving up by walking away? Once you realize the answer is absolutely nothing, the maze just disappears. Thank you so much for joining me on this